Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations and writing some code for Murock's Android Programming, 2nd edition by Joel Murock. We're smack dab in the middle of Chapter 3 of our text, and we are at the point right now where I kind of left off the code for a minute because this is maybe the most important thing that we've talked about thus far. It's only 4 pages, 70, 71, 72, and 73, but I'm going to do a whole video just on this and try to do it slowly to make sure that everybody understands what's going on. This, as mentioned, is the life cycle of an activity. All right. The activity defines different methods that are called automatically by the Android operating system at different points of the activity. For instance, when you create an activity, you create a class that inherits the activity class. To get your app to work the way you want, you override the lifecycle methods. There are other methods that you may need to override also, and this is what we're going to talk about right here. When the app starts for the first time, Android calls the onCreate, the onStart, and the onResume methods. When this happens, Android, the activity itself passes through what's called the created state, right here, and the started state, which is right there. So the onCreate method is what you typically use to create the user interface and prepare it for display. Kind of like what we have talked about before with the constructor. In the tip calculator activity, this method displays the user interface, it gets the references to the widgets, and it wires up the event handler. After the onResume method executes, the app is then in what's called here a running state. It's also known as the active state or the resumed state. Here the app is visible and it has the focus. In other words, it is what is active on your device at that time. An app may remain in the running state for a long time. If the running activity loses the focus, for instance, let's say you've got an app that you've created that runs and now your phone rings and you go to answer the phone. Then what will happen is Android will call the onPause method. This causes the activity to go into a pause state as shown right here. Android attempts to maintain the state of all activities in the pause state. That way, if you hang up the phone and you want to go back to your game or whatever the app was, you can do so. In that case, Android can call the onResume method and return to the running state. Now, typically if you get a phone call or if you navigate over to another activity, Android will call the onPause method followed by onStop, which causes the activity to go into a stop state. Here, Android attempts to maintain the state of the activity as long as it can. But a stopped activity will have a lower priority than an activity that's in a running state or a pause state. So if it gets to if you have too many stopped activities, Android will often start to kill those activities. Most life cycle states have a corresponding method, and that's what's shown in the diagram. So resume is on resume, pause is on pause, etc. So the 3 common states, I don't know if it shows it here or not, but get back to the original size. All right, so the 3 common states are these. Resumed, also known as the active or running state, where the activity is visible and has the focus. Paused, where the activity has lost the focus, may be hidden by other activities, may have gone to sleep. All right, and stopped, where another activity has taken the focus. So when you create an activity, Android calls the methods of the activity class at different points in its life cycle. An activity passes through the created state and the started state quickly. And again, it can spend a long time in the resume state, the pause state, and the stop state. All right? Now this diagram, the one that was on the previous page, shows the most commonly used life cycle methods, but it doesn't show all of them. You can go to the Android documentation at developer.android.com to find out more when you look up the activity class. All right. So when you start to do this stuff, why is this even important? All right. Well, it's important because if you've got an app that's running and it goes into the stop state, Android by itself doesn't always save the state of an activity. So if you navigate to another activity or you change the orientation of the screen by going from landscape to portrait or vice versa, what can end up happening is you can lose whatever it was that you're working with. Okay? All right. So to save the data for an activity, you can override the onPause method. To restore the data for an activity, you can override the onResume method. You can also use, as is shown right here, a shared preferences object and its editor class to both save and restore data. So for the tip calculator app, this means that the activity won't always save the bill amount and the tip percent if you change orientation or if you lose focus, so to speak. So if you only implement the onCreate, you'll automatically set the tip percent back to its default value of 15 every time, for example, you go from portrait to landscape or vice versa. What's even worse than that is the bill amount and the tip percent will be reset to their default values every time you navigate to another activity. So maybe maybe you were looking that up and you got a phone call, or you were looking that up and you decided to go to another app and come back. Since normally you want to save a user's progress, you'll typically want to save and restore the values as are shown here. So to start, you need a way to permanently save values. The Shared Preferences class, which is provided by the Android Application Program Interface, or API, allows you to do this. First, you import the Shared Preference class and the Editor class, as are shown right here. Then, as shown here, you declare a shared preference object as an instance variable. Once you've created that object, you can override whatever method or methods you need to override. You can, for example, you can override the onPause method and use the shared preference object to save values. You can restore values by overriding the onResume method. So when you work with the editor and with the shared preference objects, you need to use them to put and get values for strings and primitive data types. Now, what is next in here is they go back and actually, there's an onPause example and there's an onResume example. So what this is doing is it's grabbing the values when you pause, it's saving them to memory, so to speak, and it's putting them back in when you resume. All right. So starting on page 74, now they're going through all of the Java code. I've been giving it to you kind of piecemeally, but I want to put it all in and talk about it. So even though this has been a very short video, I'm going to stop right now before I go on again, even though, again, this is only about 10 minutes long. Now, I've got my other one still running, so I'm going to pause. You won't really know that, but I will come back then and pick it up on page 74 with the Java code for the app. Be back shortly.